Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to yet another episode of Career Trek. Uh, this is Coach Ram. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I've been into coaching for more than a decade and a practicing coach, certified by ICF Career Trek is a passion project of mine. All the career coaching sessions that I do, where people reach out to me with their career dilemmas, I take insights from those coaching conversations and publish them as blogs, part of Career Trek. You can access all of them with the hashtag 100 Days Career Trek. I'm at day 96 now, inching closer to the 100. Apart from these blogs, what I also do is get access to CXOs and senior leaders who have sort of seen many careers and have seen their careers go through different ups and downs, and there are life lessons to unlock for us. So what I do is probably once in 2 weeks, um, get senior leaders who have seen careers, have a chat with them, and let that insights be shared with everyone. So cool. So wherever you are, just say a hi to me so that I know you're in. Hi, Darshana. Okay, good to see you here. Look forward to more of you joining in. Hi, Alia. Great to see you here again. Right. Hi, Dharma. Good to see you. Great. So please keep sharing in. Say hi to us. We know we are here. And coming to the guest for the day. Uh, Hi Ravi. Thank you so much for joining. Good to see you here. Hi Papita. Hi Chaitanya. Wow. Okay, great. I'll definitely run out of. The comments are coming faster than I can read them. That's great. Hi Mohan. Hi Rahul. Hi Prabhakar. Wow, great. Let them keep coming in. So the speaker for today is someone who met in a chance meeting. I think on a spiritual tour about 4 years ago, and then we've been connected on LinkedIn. Uh, Hi Tanmay. Hi Ruchi. Javed. Wow, great to see the energy. Definitely prepping me, energizing me for this conversation. So I had a chance of connecting with our guest today again about a year ago, where he had done a session for us. Someone who is very strong on comp and ben, performance management, talent acquisition. But more than that, I think there are a few things that we share common. Uh, we say we are proud of the fact that we are not from an XLRI or TIS. I think he recently hit a milestone of 60,000 followers, and the tagline that he wrote was, "My college till very recently didn't have an alumni club." So a very different kind of a career journey. Those of you who have interacted with him will agree that he's known for his authenticity, no nonsense kind of talk. And to be frank with you, for this conversation, we had very little preparation. Probably we spoke for about 5-10 minutes. So this is one of the most unscripted sort of, I should not say unscripted, most unprepared sort of conversation, because we know the conversation will flow. Great. So I see mix of Sahil's followers and my followers here. So without further ado, let me welcome the man on the hot seat. Hi, Sahil.
Hey Ram, good morning. Good morning, everybody, whichever part of the world you are. If it's afternoon or evening for you, a very good day to all of you.
Great. So thank you, Sahil. Thank you for your time. Uh, Incidentally, this conversation is something that we set up when we recently met in XLRI campus a couple of weeks ago. Great. So thank you for your time. And uh, yeah, so Sahil, you had a fairly a different start to your career, and knowing you, you definitely look at careers very differently from how others look at it. So just for your viewers, If you can share, how do you look at careers, and probably if you can share a couple of defining moments from your career.
Absolutely, Ram. First of all, thank you so much for having me over. I've been following you very closely in terms of the work that you do at Career Trek, and I think that's absolutely awesome. So, more power to you. And while it's day 96 and another 4 more days, you're going to hit a century. May you continue on this journey of enriching lives of students, of people who really read your comments. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think you've asked a very nice question at the start of this discussion because what's happening is many of us look at careers like a linear. We look at it as point A to point B and all that it takes to move in that direction. Historically, many of us have looked at careers as pyramids because we've had a lot of people at the bottom. And as you keep going up, you have lesser number of roles, lesser number of positions, and therefore it's the race to the top. But the way I look at it is many a times the race to the top is as good as the race to the bottom. And the
Okay.
reason why I say that is because shelf lives of senior roles have significantly reduced in terms of the way we are looking at three components. One, the ability to create impact. Two, the corresponding compensation for the kind of value that is being driven at that level, with that level of seniority, with a professional per se. And number three, it's not just about impact and compensation, but it's also about how many more leaders are you creating rather than just increasing followers, right? And therefore, when you look at a career of this sort, or you look at a journey of this sort, fundamentally, the question that we need to still sit back and ask ourselves is, are careers only linear anymore? Yeah. So that's the first part to your question. Moving to the second part to your question, you asked about defining moments. I think if I have to summarize, I would like to share with all our collective viewers that every single time, and I'll repeat this, every single time that I have moved out of my comfort zone consciously, not by force, but consciously moved out of my comfort zone, I've had a very significant career defining moment. And the reason why that has happened is because I have been forced to challenge myself to say, hey, Sahil, can you do this? Right? And whenever each one of us does that, right? Whether it is Ram, Sham, or Sahil, or anybody else, or the hundreds of viewers that are on this live session right now, you explore parts of yourself, like we typically call in coaching terminology as blind spots. You explore parts of yourself that you wouldn't know existed because you moved into a territory of the unknown. And while, of course, there are a lot of emotions that get associated with the unknown, there are also a great plethora of learning opportunities that emerge when you walk into the unknown, right? So, with this context, let me share with you maybe one or two career defining moments for myself. I think when, and you have a lot of students who are on this live session, and maybe more relevant for them, when they really enter the corporate world, I think that is the first career defining moment because you're moving from a very different environment of academia into the world of industry. And that really forces you to think that everything that I've studied, where do I apply it? Right? Because what I've studied and what I'm doing are two very different things. And therefore, reconciling to that takes a couple of years till you realize that the world out here is very different. The second milestone is when we become managers, because the first couple of years is all about being the best version of yourself, right? You're learning the tricks of the trade, you're dirting your hands, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're working hard, you're burning the midnight oil. But suddenly, when you transcend from being an individual contributor to a manager, you're not going to get rewarded or recognized for doing the same things that got you there, because what got you there will not take you ahead. And therefore, overnight, you need to actually, and in fact, it's a journey. It's not about overnight, but it's about switching gears to actually saying, now I am responsible for creating 10 more Sahils. Now I am responsible for getting 10 more brilliant individuals to become as awesome as they are, not by doing it myself, but by being the wind beneath their wings, by being an enabler, by giving them opportunities, by taking a back seat and actually leading from behind. And I think that transition from an individual contributor to a manager was another significant defining moment in my career.
You great tips. You mentioned about stepping yourself or moving yourself out of comfort zone, not by force but by choice. So can you share a couple of instances when you did that? Can you give
I
us a
think
little
Ram,
of context? Yeah.
sure. I think Ram, you have this beautiful ability on latching on to the previous question and then asking the next question. So maybe what I'm going to do is play along, because if you look at this whole concept of seeing how do you really create moments where you move outside of your comfort zone, right?
Hmm.
And then get into a space where you are learning to an extent that it feels uneasy, right? It actually feels very uneasy. But when you look at instances where, and I'll maybe give you one or two instances, your question specifically was on moving outside the comfort zone, right?
Yeah, and couple of instances where you made that intentional move to put
Yeah,
yourself outside of comfort zone and how that led to your uh, growth or success.
sure. So I think Ram, today if you really look around us, right, there are so many educational institutions that are launching the future CHRO program, right? That are actually picking up N minus one, N minus two leaders and saying, hey, do you want to become a CHRO? Come join this executive learning program. But if you honestly ask me, the best way to become a CHRO is to play multiple roles in HR. Because if you've been an HR business partner, and I did that for almost 10 years of my career, and then I realized that while I've built deep expertise in partnering as an HR business partner, my appreciation for the centers of excellence within HR was very limited. Because cross functionally, while I, of course, knew what they were doing and I would appreciate their work and their contributions, the pains of being a COE professional was something I hadn't experienced.
Hmm.
And I think I decided to consciously play some of the COE roles, be it around talent management, be it around talent acquisition, be it around performance, that really helped me understand what does it mean to be across the spectrum of HR. Because eventually, when you're going to look at numero uno positions in this field of human resources, unless you've not had well-rounded holistic experience, you will not be able to understand the finer nuances of what it takes to be a CNB professional, what it takes to be an OD professional, or what it really takes to ensure you do 100 hires in 10 minutes, and what is speed interviewing. At the same time, making the candidate experience wonderful without compromising on quality. So all of these things can sound very, gibberish. It can sound very academic. It can sound a lot of English. But the reality is, when you've been in that field, played that role, then eventually, as you create more leaders, you can lead by example rather than giving motherhood statements of saying, oh, figure it out, get it done, right? Then you actually lead by example, and that makes all the difference.
Great. So what I hear you say is uh, the best learning is learning on the job, and by playing different roles, by playing diverse roles, you develop that worldview and that outlook that is required for you to play that numero uno position in. be it in HR or be it in any domain for that matter.
Yeah. And just to add to that learning, Ram, while you're summarizing it very beautifully, I think the need for collaboration across domains, whether it is within HR, outside HR, manifests itself beautifully when you've played that role. Because when you understand the challenges of a talent acquisition professional, when you've been a talent acquisition professional, is very different from not having played that role and just trying to empathize or sympathize and say, no, no, I understand your problem, but ultimately it's your job. Why are you not doing it? Versus saying, you know what, buddy, I did that 4 years ago. I knew the market was very tough. We tried these three things, they didn't work. Maybe this thing worked. Why don't you try this? And that's when the guy on the other side is going to say, hey, man, this guy really understands me. And I think half of the problems that happen around us are because of people feeling, and feeling is the code word, that they are not being understood.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of lovely comments coming in from Sheila, from Alia. Thank you. That definitely keeps us going, the conversation going. So, yeah, I definitely relate to that. When the feeling of not being understood, that's what creates a sort of deficit in ways of working and so on and so forth. While the challenge that I come across with many of my coaches face is, yes, they agree. uh, you want to switch, you want to play different roles, you want to play from they typically say, uh, specifically to HR, they say, okay, you play a HRBP role and then you play two CEO roles and then you're ready for a CHR role. And I'm not making the discussion very specific to HR, but essentially, even if you want to play a P&L kind of a role, then they say that you do a sales role, then you do an excellence sales excellence kind of a role, so that you are ready, ultimately ready for a P&L role. The challenge that some of them face is you tend to get typecasted and politically incorrect, what we call as casteism in recruitment. Everyone wants that perfect fit. If I'm a pharma company, then I want someone who has worked in pharma, who has worked in that particular region, that particular industry, so that the learning curve is less. So all the opportunities that people tend to get are more and more of what they have done, whereas they may be keen to build diversity in the experience, but they get more of the same. So how do you deal with, and if you're part of large organizations, of course there are job rotations, etc., that happen, but that's a very limited that's for a very limited number of professionals. But for the larger group, what do you suggest on how do you make that for yourself? And the whole career track, the point is about self-help talent management. What a talent management team would do in large organizations, you're doing it for yourself. So how do I make that move when I'm constantly getting more of what I already am?
So I think, Ram, that's a brilliant question. And I have three submissions to make here. But before I make those three submissions, a personal view here is that these ways of thinking are very archaic. And the reason why I believe so is because think of it, right? It's the diminishing marginal law of demand, right? Diminishing marginal utility. You're going to say that I'm going to keep doing more, 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 more of the same thing, and therefore I'll keep getting better, 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 better. But eventually, so much more of the same thing gets you to blind yourself to aspects that otherwise come in when there is an absolutely fresh perspective. When there's someone who comes in with a very different skill set, a very different way of looking at things, a very different experience, having worked in a very different geography, suddenly you'll say, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years, but I never thought of this, right?
Hmm.
So that's the business case around saying you don't need to really have more of the same to get better at what you're doing. Yeah. It's
Right.
like a classic case of
Okay.
saying when we saw television move the way it went, you started seeing more people on prime time. You started seeing more shouting matches. You started seeing bigger font and red font. But when you sat back and asked yourself, did that conversation even make sense? you're bewildered, right? So that's the first context around this, and it's a very personal view. Coming to how do you enable this, I think you put it very beautifully that large organizations have multiple roles, and therefore there are, job rotations, internal job postings. You apply to them, you can really take it up. But if you really go back and see, and I was having a conversation with one of my mentees, and a couple of weeks back, she was sharing with me that she's very, very proud of one of her managers. And I asked her, I said, tell me what happened. And she said, you know what? This is the same guy who took a bet on me when I was nothing 10 years back. Now,
True.
that is what we need more of, Ram. What we need more of is not about saying all checklist ticked, perfect fit, let's go ahead. What we need to say is today we may not have enough evidence of performance, but there are clear signs of potential. And I think many of us struggle with identifying the right potential. I think if we can get the potential aspect correct, whether it's through gut, whether it's through psychometric, whether it is through a scientific way of interviewing, doesn't matter. But if you can get your potential right and then have the courage, and like I call it the three J's, right? The Josh, the Jazba, and the Junoon, to say, let me take a bet on this person. Trust me, the psychological contract, the moral obligation, and the positive pressure on the individual to say, hey man, I can't let Ram down because Ram has decided to put his money on me. And that kind of feeling drives hunger in people a lot more than what a chip on the shoulder would do because I have a great degree, I have a great godfather, or I have great pedigree.
Absolutely. I think um, it's about people taking bets on talent, and definitely I've seen those bets work, and I owe my career growth to many mentors who have taken bets on me, managers who have become mentors, and one of them is part of the show today. So very clear in terms of uh, as managers what we need to do, not look for clones, not look for templates, uh, but as a candidate, as an individual, I'll be lucky if I get mentors, managers like that who are willing to take the bet on me. How do I put myself in a position where uh, people take bets on me? How do I find those mentors?
I think, Ram, it's an age old saying, right? You can take the horse to the water, but you can't make the horse drink the water. And I
Yeah.
think as many mentors as you may have around you, as many coaches as you may have around you, the teacher really appears when the student is ready,
Mhm.
right? And therefore, a couple of aspects or traits that will really make people take a bet on you. And I think these are very, very simple aspects, but very, very underrated. Number
Mhm.
one is consistency. We've seen a lot of people who've been great sparks, right? But then they just fizzle out with a period of time. They just fizzle out, completely fizzle out. And therefore, the power of showing up every single day is massively underrated. You may have good days, you may have bad days, but the ability to get up every morning and show up, irrespective whether you partied till 4 in the morning the previous night or whether you slept in because you had 103-degree fever, but the show must go on. And therefore, consistency of showing up is very important. Number two, we spoke about the horse. What do stallions do differently? Stallions are true breed, right? What do stallions do differently? They have that hunger. And that hunger has to come not just from the epiglottis by just yapping away. The hunger has to come in the belly. There has to be that fire in the belly to say, boss, I gotta do it. Come what may, I gotta do it. And when that hunger and that fire in the belly doesn't let you sleep, that is very clearly visible to everyone around you. It's very clearly visible. And the third, I think, which many of us don't do a great job of, which people very, very, if I may use the word, subconsciously expect is the attitude of gratitude, right? I think that is significantly missing. When we create our stories, we find it very easy going around tom-tomming saying, "Hey, I did this." But what we don't realize is behind that I, there are 100 other eyes who played a role to enable me to do this. Yeah, they made the ride less bumpier. They ensured the potholes were filled. They ensured that the rain was controlled. And they actually ensured that the environment was conducive for me to be who I am so that I can be at my optimum potential. And all they expect is not about going onto a LinkedIn live session and taking their names and thanking them out. But all they expect is very simple things of having an attitude of gratitude. And many a times we start feeling so full of ourselves that we just put them on the sidelines. And that really doesn't work. So these are the three things, Ram, that I think an individual needs to himself or herself do to create the visibility so that people are willing to take that bet.
Great. So good. Yeah, I think a lot of comments coming in. Ravi, Sheila, Mohan. Great. Yeah. So consistency, having that hunger, fire in the belly, and having the attitude of gratitude. So good. That's a great formula to have in terms of, how do you find your next pivot of sorts. And there are many leaders around you who will spot you and give you those opportunities. And that's what I see Ravi resonating with. So you mentioned one as moving out of a HRBP role and taking up COE roles as one of your defining moments. Is there any such moment in earlier part of your career?
Yeah, so I said, as I mentioned, right, early part of my career, I think, and I played this role even earlier in my career. I think, what we do, Ram, is one, many of us, because we are good at what we do, we are successful. Okay. Now, hear me
Mhm.
very carefully on this one because I'll go on it step by step. Success is an outcome. Celebrating success is a moment, but adding emotions to success is the real impact. What do I mean by this? We do a job well done, we are successful. We move on in life because there's so much to do, right? And therefore, many a times we wait for that one big day. That one big day never comes, right? It's about celebrating those small moments of success collectively as a team, as a function, with your family, with your loved ones. That actually does a lot of good because it makes you feel good about yourself, right? And that is a basic human need. So I think while success is an outcome, celebrating success is equally important. Now, if I have to just dig a little more deeper at a psychological level, we see a lot of people celebrating success, right? They throw big parties, they call their friends over, they pop a champagne. It's amazing. When they go back home and you ask them, "Hey, did you enjoy the party? Are you happy? How are you feeling right now?" And
Mhm.
many often you'll hear, "Hey, man, it was so exhausting. Yeah, it was so tiring. My dear friends, let's smell the coffee. Was that party thrown to exhaust you? Did you throw a party so that people could come, drink fantastic scotch, get drunk, and go home? Or did you throw a party so that people come together? You're celebrating emotions. You're letting emotions overflow rather than spirits overflow. And many times, Ram, we don't let emotions marry outcomes. And while we may celebrate success, the happiness associated with it, the joy associated with the kind of feeling on top of the world, yet being grounded, those kind of feelings, we lock them in somewhere because we're too scared to open that door. We're too scared to open up that curtain because we've put them all in there and said, you know what, it's not right to be vulnerable. I shouldn't be showing my feelings here. It's okay, it's a party, we are having fun, and that's about it. But I don't want to go and tell a small group of people with whom I'm really close to say, you know what, while we're celebrating this entire success, there were two things that I did on this project that were not really good. I made two blunders, and those are my learnings. And you 100 people who come to my celebration, I want to share those two learnings with you, because when you go through life and you have such experiences, don't make the same mistake. But the moment you do that, you're standing in between celebration. You're standing in between the bar opening and you giving a Gyan session. And therefore, people say, let the DJ play, let the music play. But the reality is, when you really manifest some of those things, is when you're in touch with your emotions. And that's when you walk back from that party saying, Yaar, aaj to maza aa gaya. It's not कि हम सिर्फ भंड हो गए या बहुत दारू पी ली, but आज मजा आ गया because I connected with my core, and that is very important, Ram.
Absolutely. I like the way you beautifully dissected different elements of success. One is the event in itself, how you celebrate it, and also how you absorb it. Right? I think a lot of times I definitely see people who come back from vacation and say, "I need a break from the vacation." Right? So yeah, great. So now what we'll do?
And sorry, Ram, just to add one more thought, right? I have a lot of people who come back from vacation on a Thursday and then take Friday off and then Saturday, Sunday and go back to work on Monday. And I normally ask these guys, I said, boss, you came back from a vacation. Why did you not come to work on a Friday? Anyway, Friday is a light day. And they said, you know what? I need to normalize my vacation. Do you know what normalizing a vacation is? Like, it sounded bizarre to me the first time I heard it. And I was thinking, you went to rejuvenate yourself, but now the guy needs 3-4 days to normalize the rejuvenation, saying, oh, I'm coming back to the world, I'm coming back to reality, and therefore I need to calibrate. Because suddenly, if I get to the workplace, that vacation will feel like a pain.
Okay. Very interesting analysis. The way I look at it, any conversation or any activity or anything of that sort, does it energize you? Does it get you more ready, or does it deflate you? So it doesn't matter if it's a trip at an exotic location, or I sometimes see people say I'm vacationing at my home in my bedroom. So if that's what energizes you, great. Okay. So what we'll do now, Sahil, is there are some questions which uh, there are common questions that people have asked me, and some questions which have come through the form. So we're going to look at. We probably have about 15-20 minutes to go, and we sort of address some of these questions while a few more questions come along the way. The first one that's coming up is, I think you have a huge follower base, and you've built a personal brand for yourself. You've built HR Bytes and so on and so forth. So the question that comes up is, should I build a personal brand, or doing well in my job, is that good enough, and how do I go about it?
Ram, I think that's a very powerful question. And the reason why I say powerful is because there are two schools of thought on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first school of thought is, if you actually look at, and for a minute, let's just look at the ecosystem as the HR fraternity, right? There are a lot of people who are doing amazing work in HR, path breaking work, futuristic work in HR, and they are not on LinkedIn, they are not on social media, they don't come and attend conferences, They do not do keynote speeches. They're not out there, but they're doing
Mm.
brilliant work, right? So they're not investing in the so called definition of building a personal brand. All right. And
Okay.
then there are a lot of people who you see 5 times a week have never had dinner at home because every evening they are at some event having dinner at a five-star, either as a participant or as a speaker or as a moderator, right? And many people gossip and say, hey, what does their company pay them for? They're at events the whole day through the week, right? Now, the irony is at the intersection of these two. Which brand, according to you, and let me maybe flip this question, Ram, to you, because I know you're also a thought leader in your own right. Which brand, according to you, is a stronger brand? The one that is on social media, that's out there, that's in the face because out of sight is out of mind, that's winning every award in the space, that is putting up a LinkedIn post every day, that is content creating, or a brand that is working in his or her organization, impacting lives, doing great work, and a very, very successful professional? Which is a stronger brand? Because both are personal brands.
Well, this was supposed to be career trek with Sahil and not career trek with Ram. But because you put the question on me, I'll respond to it. So, I usually take the example of a go down and a showroom. So, the first brand that you spoke of, someone doing very path breaking work, but never out there, never really sharing that best practice, or it's probably very constrained to that particular ecosystem, is what I would call as a go down. There is rich treasure over there, but that's just within that ecosystem. And then you have a showroom, and what is there in the go down can never be seen or learned by others, etc. So showroom is where you showcase, etc. And the way you put it is at the intersection of these two. You need a certain level of moderation there, where you say yes, this is great work that we are doing, but it's also out there for the industry to gain from.
So, Ram, let me pick up your showroom and go down example, which is a 2D model, and with your permission, make it into a 3D model, right?
Sure.
There is the go down, there is the showroom, and then there is the brand. Now, many times we all leverage the organization brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, we are also building our personal brand. Now, the question is, does the personal brand at times attempt to cannibalize the organization brand because the personal brand is becoming or aspiring to become bigger than the organization brand? Reference to context: the moment you are not on the chair, the moment you are an individual without the backing of the organization or the brand you're associated with, do you still glitter like things glitter in a showroom? Or are you thrown back to the go down saying, sit in the corner there because you don't have the brand?
Yeah, so I usually my short one line definition for personal brand is who you are without your business card. So drop the designation, drop the organization, and who you are is what you are. So
But isn't that ironic, Ram? It's so ironic, right? Because while you're grateful to your organization and your title and the chair, ultimately it is Ram or Sahil or Sham or Ashish or hundreds of other people who are listening in, or a Shrikant, who are actually who they are because of what they do, right? And if you are who you are because of what you do, just because you've been fired due to COVID, or just because you've lost a job, or just because you decided to prioritize your family over your career and took a sabbatical, does the essence or the capability or the competency of who you are get taken away in such situations? And trust me, this is a very hard hitting conversation, but this is the reality of our lives.
Absolutely, completely agree with you. Are there a couple of tips that you can share for someone who wants to build a personal brand? So someone who is not out there, the first type of brand that we spoke of, um, if they want to, and each one of us at some point at our journey will say that, okay, I've been all within the organization just too focused on my job, etc. Now I want to build a personal brand for myself. So how do I go about it?
I think multiple ways to do that, and there are so many books written on this, so I won't go the author way, but maybe I'll give you a practitioner's perspective. I think one, any brand that gets built needs to be built on a brand promise, right? And I think that promise is about what do you stand for? Yeah. What is your USP? What do you stand for? And how do you deliver that again, going back consistently and more importantly with credibility? So when you deliver consistently with credibility, that's when people look at you to say, hey, I can trust this person. And trusted brands are the brands that actually create a cult. So, couple of jargon words: cult, trust, consistency, credibility. But fundamentally, there is a lot to do with packaging. We've seen this when we were growing up. A very flamboyant guy got into the space of education, started a great institute, was all over page three in parties, was on the headlines, was on page one with the institute. Suddenly, we realized that institute doesn't exist anymore, right? A lot of flamboyance, a lot of class, a lot of international faculty. You drive into your college in a Ferrari. Hello, essence is missing, right? And on the other hand, you also have brands that are very down to earth, that are very humble, that are very path breaking, but at the same time are not as flamboyant, right? And therefore, I think if you ask me personally, I think it is the fine balance of form and substance. One over the other never works.
Cool. So substance and form. I think Shrikant here is sort of resonating. He's talking about FOMO, another jargon over there. So a lot of people want to build a personal brand because there's a lot of talk about personal brand. Great. That's a perspective. Cool. So here is another common question that we get. So let me see what's your perspective on this. Big fish in small pond or small fish in big pond? How do
So
you how do
again,
you respond?
yeah, and I think Ram, that's another jargon question. So let me answer it with a jargon.
No, you can
Uh,
break the cycle of jargon.
Break the cycle of jargon and say different strokes for different folks. So I've
But
actually done both, right?
I now feel like there are times where we usually play an antakshari with songs and movie names of sorts. I think we can definitely have an antakshari between some 10 HR folks saying, you have to start a jargon with the last word of the previous.
And with VUCA and Bani and Tuna and so many other jargons coming up and acronyms coming up, I think
I know.
we'll really do a good job at that. But I think coming to the question, right? Big fish, small fish, big pond. My answer would be different strokes, different folks. I've actually had the lucky fortune of doing both, right?
Mhm.
Um, I started off my career as a management trainee in a family run business in real estate, right?
Mm.
Small pond, basic aspects of saying how do you build loyalty by demonstrating proximity, right? From there, how do you understand a Lala mindset, right?
Mm.
To
Mm.
how do you really get decisions to be taken? And ultimately, while it is a family, family में भी झगड़े होते हैं. So how do you manage those झगड़as, right?
Mm.
To suddenly moving into a large organization that I'm part of today and that's growing exponentially, Suddenly, from a big fish, I became a very small fish in not just a pond, not just a sea, but in an ocean, right? And
Yeah.
that's when that fighter song, if you've heard the fighter song, came to life to say, you got the streams, you got the ocean, right? And that's when you said, hello. A lot of people say this, right? When they move organizations, they had a cultural shock. And that's when you need to say all the beautiful concepts of agility, resilience, adaptability. How do you bring them to life? Because suddenly, when I would be in the center of everything in my previous organization, here I was just a very small fly on the wall.
Yeah.
So mentally, just adjusting to that itself takes time. And then from there, saying, hello, it's not a zero sum game. You're starting at zero because you're building it all over again in a new organization, new stakeholders. People don't know you. You're building your credibility. You're delivering value. You're creating impact, so on and so forth. But it's not a zero sum game in spite of starting with zero. And I think fundamentally understanding this concept of saying starting with zero doesn't mean it's a zero sum game is very empowering. And then you really grow up the ranks.
Great. So there are pros and cons of it's different being in a small pond, being in a big pond. How you play and how you adapt makes all the difference.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, just to answer your question, if you had to put a gun to my head saying pick one, I would very simply say pick something that resonates with your style of being. Pick something that resonates with who you are as a person, right?
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of people who have generation after generation worked with the Lala, right? The grandfather was there, then the father joined, and now the son is also working. So what happens is while the Lala is growing, this family is also growing because the Lala educated the son, then the grandson. Now the grandson feels indebted. Now he's working. Grandson is aspirational. Lala sent him to a great college. He came back. He said, you know what? Now I'm not working with your father. I'm working with your son. Son is a Harvard MBA return. This guy is a smart guy. They're doing really well, right? And that's the entire value system. And that's the way the two families are growing. Brilliant for them, right? There could be another situation where you may say, you know what? This feels too claustrophobic. I'm not empowered enough. Every decision has to be done on pen and paper. The world has moved on. Or you know what? This place is just too political. Versus another organization where you may start feeling lost. So, like Srikant mentioned, if you're going to have FOMO and that is consistently going to continue, then the question remains, are you in your own skin? And if you're not in your own skin, no point being at a place that you don't feel belong.
Absolutely. I completely resonate, and comparisons can take away your energy only if you are not centered in yourself. That's when
True.
everything that everyone has seems to appeal better than what you already have. So here is a
Ram, I
question
think
from
Ram Pramod has put a very, very good point on the chat, and I think you've highlighted it. Maybe you were
yeah.
alluding to that as well. Why don't you go ahead, Ram?
Yeah, so the way I'm reading his question is I've identified my next pivot or direction. How do I know what do I need to do and how do I prepare for that journey? That's what I'm inferring from that question.
Yeah,
Do you want to have a dab at it?
yeah, absolutely. I think Pramod Sehgal, brilliant, brilliant question. And I think this is a question that not just us, but many people who will be listening to this recording and across the world should also pay heed to. I think two parts to this. The first part is each one of us, whether we like it or we don't like it, we all hit our level of incompetence sometime or the other, right? And what do I mean by this? There could be a situation where you are bumped up into a role slightly before you're ready for it. And that's when you start struggling to say, boss, suddenly life has changed. What appeared or felt very easy for me, I'm currently struggling with. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to take a decision. I don't know what next to do. I'm experiencing paranoia, right? And that's when you realize that while you were fighting for that promotion, sit back and reflect, were you even ready for it? Or were you at the other end of the spectrum where 6 months before you got promoted, you were already delivering at that level, and a promotion or an elevation was just a byproduct? And therefore, every time you hit your level of incompetence, please remember and realize that the red flags and the indicators and the signs are always visible. Always. It is just that we choose to ignore them because that's the dark side of us. So we choose to ignore them. But every time there is a blind curve, don't accelerate. And every time there is a curve, when you accelerate, you get the right throttle to move much faster on that curve. But many times, what ends up happening, ironically, is we confuse a visible curve with a blind curve. And therefore, many career treks or tracks or whatever you want to call it, the trek becomes exhausting when you've lost out on stamina because you haven't done an endurance run. But when you've done an endurance run, it doesn't matter because you know you got to do 100 kilometers, you'll do it. But if you're used to just doing 10 kilometers, the 20th kilometer is going to be tough, the 30th even tougher, and the 40th you'll want to give up. But if you've done 100-kilometer endurance runs, it doesn't matter because you built in that stamina, you built in that muscle, right? On the other hand, when you're running a sprint, when you're running a relay, which happens most of the time in the corporate world because we work with each other, we collaborate. I think fundamentally, we find it very difficult to ask for help. I don't know why. So many people, and Ram, we spoke about this slightly earlier in the conversation to say, how is it? Do I keep growing? What do I do? What milestones? Many people right at the top may not have had exposure in depth on every single thing that an SME would know, or a manager would know, or an assistant manager would know. But there's a reason why they're at the top because they can enable people to be successful. They don't need to know the nuts and bolts of everything that happens on the ground. Similarly, in a relay race, if you don't know the basic concept of radius and diameter and you still wonder why is that guy ahead of me when the race hasn't even begun, and you don't even know that that guy is covering more distance and therefore he's ahead, but psychologically in your mind you're thinking, why is he ahead of me? The race has begun, we all at the start line. But my dear friend, there is a concept of radius and diameter. And when you don't know that concept, as a professional with 20 years of experience, you hit your level of incompetence. And I'm just picking a metaphor here. It could apply in different ways and forms in your stream or in your career.
I love the analogy of the blind curve, acceleration, and throttle. I think a lot of times the relationship between aspiration and ability. Aspiration races ahead, whereas ability may not catch up. And if ability is always ahead of aspiration, then people around you will recognize you even before your aspiration hits there.
Yeah.
Great.
And Ram, I think so. While you added two dimensions, sorry, I'm tempted to add the third dimension, right? Uh, so aspiration, ability, and unfortunately, Ram, many a times, attitude comes in a manner that we never imagined. We've seen a lot of people who are so successful in life and they're yet so humble in spite of being amazing leaders right at the top. They have a guest come in, they'll actually open the door, they will walk the guest out to the elevator. And you see the junior most guy sitting on his chair, reclining and saying, tell me what happened. Why have you come? Why are you 15 minutes late, right, for the meeting? And I think it's the attitude coupled with the intersection of ability and aspiration that differentiates the good from the great.
Perfect. So we are 5 minutes short of 12, and I know you are rushing into something else. So uh, thank you so much for your time. Any any parting note that you would like to share before we sign off?
No, I think Ram, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I know it's been long pending, and we keep saying we'll get back to you, but thank you for getting back and actually having this conversation on the lovely Sunday morning. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. So thank you for the opportunity. One, number two, no gyan, but I would just like to say that each one of us are in a very powerful profession as HR professionals, right? And I think it's paramount that we take a lot of pride in our function. It's paramount that we actually build skills for the future. And lastly, nothing more better than being a happy human being. So do things that make you happy. And while you've heard us here, the rest of the Sunday, do something that makes you happy and enjoy yourself. Thank you so much for having me over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sahil. I know there are some questions which are left unanswered. Please feel free to ping either Sahil or me on DM, and I will definitely respond. And thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning with us. Have a great day ahead. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.